Hello. It is Askkrystalracquel, and I'm back again with another video. I'm doing things a little bit different. I just felt like I really had some things on my heart. Over the past few weeks, things have been coming to me. I've been jotting down notes, and I just wanted to make something very organized for you. The topic of today's video is identifying toxic male podcasts. I put this together last night in about 30 minutes. Just taking together all of my notes. This is obviously not just going to be me reading off notes, but these were just all the things that I had been jotting down over the past couple weeks based on what I've seen. So this video is for men and women. This video is not speaking negatively against men. This video is helping you identify the male podcasts that you should not watch. And of course, there are definitely toxic women or female podcasts for sure, but the ones that I've been seeing a lot of are men. So I just wanted to talk about that. Once again, this video, if you're a man, you can watch it. This may kind of help you identify some podcasts that you shouldn't watch, and the same for women. It's just very important for us to be able to understand what we're consuming and make sure that we are watching things that are educational and actually helpful to us and are going to help us be good members of society. So yes, this is in presentation form. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me move it back. I want to make sure I have the full screen here. So what are you gonna expect with everything I go over today? Keep in mind, this is like the same as me talking like I normally do, but now there's just some notes if you want to follow along, because it's a bit for me to go through. I am Askkrystalracquel, as you all know, and thank you all for being my subscribers. I'm a certified life coach. I also have my background and expertise in public health, specifically prevention, and I really do have a heart for mental health. I also have some of my background is in education, human resources, and human development as well. So just thought I'd throw it out there for anyone who doesn't really know much about me. I know I talk a lot in my videos, but I never really speak much about myself. When I talk about this, it's going to be primarily about what you should be avoiding. So it's going to be different terminology that some of the podcasts use and phrases. They're talking points that you're going to come across. So when you see these talking points, these specific words, you can watch it for a little bit longer, but it might be something you need to run away from. So keep that in mind. And just so you know, like the foundation and base of my knowledge, I am a Christian, so I sometimes do bring in biblical knowledge. I also have the gift of wisdom for anyone who is familiar with Christianity and the gifts and fruits of the Spirit. So yeah, a lot of my knowledge, it comes from my own experiences. It could be from my own educational background, or it could just be the Holy Spirit guiding me. So I want to make that clear. And definitely remember, this is so important. Men are not the problem, okay? We definitely need men, and men need us. We complement each other. But that's also why it's so important to be able to identify the podcast not to watch. Once again, I'm not talking about any toxic female podcasts for this video. This one specifically, the ones that I've been seeing a lot of, and the ones that I think are probably influencing people. We compliment men, and men are the leader, and they definitely need us to compliment them as well. Feel free to take some notes, and it's so important to guard your heart and mind. The Bible talks about that. You need to guard your ears and your eye gates and your thoughts. So if you feel like this is a video, like I'm going to be going over all the terminology, words, things that I've come across over time. But if you feel like that's something that's going to make you start believing in those teachings, then I would even encourage you not to watch, because I wouldn't want to be a hindrance to anyone, because I am going to be going over all of the points that are being made in a lot of those podcasts. And then I really just want people to be able to further develop, live a full life, a positive life. So it's just important not to consume that teaching from bad teachers, I'll be honest, that is really polluting a lot of minds out there. So here we go. First and foremost, if you remember anything from this video, it should be this. This is what you should avoid when you're consuming content. Some of it could be self-help or whatever the content is called, but when you start hearing things like red pill and purple pill, I know that the red pill is specifically for this toxic group. Purple pill, I believe, has branched off from that. But if you hear either of those, it's probably not something that you need to watch. It's probably going to be irrelevant to you as a woman. It's probably not going to help you as a man in terms of being a leader, being a man the way God has called you to be. If you hear things like the manosphere, run. It's not going to help you. It's going to have a lot of toxic teachings in it. And it's not somebody who's just talking about this just to talk, because I've seen this content. I've seen these things over the past couple years. I'm not saying I'm someone that consumes the content, but let's say there's a YouTuber that I like, or there's a clip somewhere that I like, and they're talking about some of the content, and I see it, then that might lead me to go check out some of that channel. And then I'll see, whoa, this is what it's really about. And on the surface, some of the stuff seems innocent, but it's really not. So a lot of it will draw you in. If you're a man, it speaks highly of men. It'll draw you into that. And as women, it'll draw you in because it's a man talking, and you think, oh, this is what a real man wants. If you see manosphere, red pill, purple pill, just run. And of course, red pill is the one you mainly hear, but I don't know what really purple pill is. It might be like a better, or something that portrays itself as a better version of red pill. But I mean, it's just no point. It's for you to even know. People might say it's ignorant, but there's certain things, this is not to offend anyone. There's certain times where there were times, now I finally do know what cis and transgender were. There were times I was like, don't even tell me what it means. I don't care, because I know what I am. I'm a woman, and that's it. So sometimes it's not really necessary for you to even understand what the terminology is, but maybe eventually we'll all get the definition of purple pill too. Not that it's necessary. And then men focused on chastising of women. If you notice that a content creator, all of the videos, I'll just assume it's a man. We'll just say a man for the example, for the purpose of this video, which is about toxic male podcast. Not to say that it's only men that do this, but let's say it's a man, and their purpose, based on what you see on their podcast, at least 50-75% of their content is about women, and women in bad situations, or women making some not so good decisions. Run. And the whole thing of what I know is there's a community of men, they're called incel, and this is where red pill has branched off from. Actually, incel means involuntary celibate. Of course, as a Christian, you should be celibate, you should be abstinent, you should not be engaged in sexual activity prior to marriage. But there's a group of men who, they're probably not Christians, so I'm assuming they're involuntarily celibate, and this is not to speak negatively about anyone, but there's a group of men who, they are in a situation where there may be women that they're interested in, and that the women are interested in them back, or, they're trying to engage in premarital sex and women are not interested in them. So I believe that's where the red pill has branched off from, based on my own research. And then if you hear terminology like simps, I don't know if simps stands for anything, but simps is usually a man who You'll hear people call men simps if they're treating a woman nicely, or if they are letting a woman run all over them. So the reason why I say if they're treating a woman nicely, because I've heard times a man is just being a good Christian man, treating his woman well. People will call him that. But then I believe the true definition is when a man is allowing women to run all over them. So you run when you hear those terms. And if it's given something like, this seems like a very misogynistic channel, like speaking negatively about women, men are the best. Yes, the Bible definitely outlines that men are the head and women are the helpmeet, but that does not mean that God believes that men are better than women. There's going to be men in heaven and women in heaven, just the same. Okay, so if you might even see in some of the comments, or even the person themselves, I'm not sure if they're going to actually say that, especially if it's on YouTube, because they might get, cancel culture, or they might get demonetized, but you may see them mention it, or their supporters may even mention that they're misogynist and proud of it. Okay, so if there's anything you remember, it's gonna be this. Okay, so red pill, run. Purple pill, manosphere, run. Talking about simps, misogyny, focus on women on all their videos and the bad things that women do, run. Okay, so if you have some more time, here we go. The first part I want to talk about is, a lot of times the podcasts are going to be talking about women and their mental state in a negative way. This is a way to try to down talk women. So just be mindful of that. I'm going to go into a couple different slides about that, or a couple different points. This is how you can definitely identify if it's a toxic male podcast. If they're talking about women in a way like women have mental issues and things like that, it's time for you to run, because mental health issues are real for both men and women. And a lot of the women that they're talking about with their mental health issues don't even have mental health issues. So it's a way to kind of disrespect women. If you're noticing that they're talking about the mental state a lot, not a good podcast to watch. You are going to hear this word a lot. You're going to hear them use the word accountability. Okay? So, accountability is not a bad word. Accountability is a good thing. However, this word is being used so much, similar to how the word narcissist is being used by everyone whenever they dislike something about someone. So accountability now, this is being used as a word to talk about women with. Accountability essentially means being responsible, right? That's usually what the word was. Or accountability, it was often used if, someone had an issue, they wanted a partner to work out with, to keep them accountable, or they had a nutritionist. That's how the word was often used. It's now being used by a lot of toxic male podcasts. So if you're hearing this word a lot, you may need to run. It's actually seeping into other podcasts too, like podcasts that aren't even speaking poorly about women. Normal male podcasts, normal women podcasts is seeping into that as well. So it's something for you to watch out for, because you're going to find that it's always going to be directed towards women. That's the main thing. You'll notice, part of being a man as the head, the head, the leader, a lot of the responsibility falls on you. Of course, women need to be responsible as well. I'm not saying that women should not be responsible. My point is, if you see a podcast and they're talking about women being accountable, but not talking about men being accountable, that's a bad sign, especially if it's a man, because men are accountable first. And if you're noticing that their videos are all about women and they're not focusing on women being responsible, on men being responsible, that's a red flag. Red flag. Okay? You'll also hear people say accountability is kryptonite for women. That is something that I believe came from Kevin Samuels. May he rest in peace. Okay? So they'll say things like that. Run if you hear that. Um, Here's a big one. She should have chosen better. They'll say she should have chosen better. This comes to when, let's say, maybe the man is not a good man. Oh, there's one other thing I should have mentioned, but let's say the man, they'll say things like the man is a Pookie or a Ray Ray or Tyrone. If you hear those words run as well, those names, they'll mention things like that. And they'll say the woman's in a bad situation because she ended up with a man like that, and not even figure, why are there so many men like that? And when it comes to a woman, let's say the man ends up with a woman that's not so good, they'll never say that he should have chosen better. So you want to be mindful of those things. And of course, women definitely should try to choose the best men for their lives. But I mainly think about choosing better when you see it's like a pattern, right? If you know nothing about this woman, for all you know, the man, he could have been a good man, then he switched up on her years later. So be mindful if you hear them say the woman should have chosen better. But when it's a different situation for a man and a woman, they blame the woman, okay? Be mindful of that. So big thing on accountability here, run. I'm not saying run because accountability is a bad thing. It's just that it's being so overused within this manosphere that most likely the accountability is only for the woman. Here's another word, delusion. If you're hearing this word a lot in the podcast, it's probably a toxic podcast, okay? And I know I said toxic male podcast, but it could be any podcast. It is seeping into all different types of podcasts. And delusion, okay? What does that word mean? It's referencing false beliefs. It's referencing someone having an abnormal thinking pattern. Even can be associated with hallucinations. So when you think about this word delusion, this is not your average person. This is someone who more than likely has a psychological issue. You will see this word used so loosely to describe women. I have a male podcast that I watch. He's great. He's a Christian. I even heard him use the word delusion before. Not saying he's a toxic podcast. He's not. I'm just saying the word is seeping into different areas. So be mindful when you hear this word. If you're talking about delusional woman, be mindful. Delusional is a word that references the psychological state. So this is another word to try to diminish the way a woman thinks. And more than likely, it's a toxic podcast, okay? When you start hearing that word delusion being thrown around to kind of disregard a woman or disregard feelings or her own thinking pattern, it's not a good sign. Another word, you're going to hear them saying that women are emotional. I always like to remember men and women are completely different. It's just the way it is. God created us differently. So, me personally, I'm someone who's not the most emotional woman, but I understand that as a whole, women are more emotional than men. Men seem to think more from the rational part. And when you get down to it, when you think about it, you're like, okay, the men are the protector, right? Men are the provider. If men are the protector, those are the ones that are going to be sent to war, correct? So if they're sent to war, are they really going to be able to be so emotional? They're going to be crying in war, right? So it's just the way we're created. We're the caregivers. So when men are just trying to throw out the word emotional, thinking with emotional, you're not rational, that's their way to try to say one way is wrong. Me personally, like I said, I'm not super emotional. However, I understand that we're all created differently. But women, they're a little bit more sensitive than men on average. So when you start hearing them calling women emotional as a bad thing, first of all, the Bible says that women, we are the weaker sex. So there's no reason to kind of down talk the women as that gender. It is what it is. If the woman's a little more emotional, that's just the way she was created. So if you notice them saying those things, it's probably not a podcast that you should be watching, because it's once again just a way to use it's a way to use the one of the traits of a woman to speak negatively about them, making it seem that the woman is emotional, she has a mental health problem, something like that. Here is a big one. Physical appearance. Physical appearance. You'll hear the men focus on physical appearance, and I've made videos before about dating and how to date. And absolutely, physical appearance, that is of interest to both men and women when they're looking for a mate. But let's go a little bit more in depth. You are going to see on the Toxic Male podcast, they're going to be using a rating scale. Okay? On this rating scale, it'll go from 1 to 10 based on appearance. Sometimes they might do appearance and something else, like an overall. And it's always going to be for women, or usually for women. They might occasionally ask for a male rating, but it's usually going to be for women. And I say all this to say, back in the day, like occasionally a scale will come up, but it wasn't as serious. And rest in peace to Kevin Samuels, but a lot of this stems from Kevin Samuels. Keep in mind, he was an image consultant, so it kind of makes sense why he brought that into the dating realm, but as a whole, it's just not something that you would use to describe someone. It's not something that really gets to the depth of someone, especially if you're a Christian. And I'm not trying to be funny, but never in my life, anyone that I have had interest in, whether I thought they were attractive or not, or let's say I'm interested in someone, I find them attractive. I have never in my life thought of rating them on a scale of 1 to 10 ever. The person could be so good looking, or even if the person was okay, I thought they were okay. I have never thought to rate someone on a rating scale, so it really just brings it down to some really superficial things. And I know even men and women that I know, they don't even do that. It's like the person looks good, they look hot, they look pretty, they look good looking, they're okay looking. Oh, that person doesn't look good. It's never a rating scale. That really just reduces people to just their appearance. So if you see like on a dating podcast, they start asking women, oh, how do you rate yourself, or we're gonna rate you, that's a way to try to attack the woman's self-esteem for some reason. And of course, looks do matter. People like to be with somebody that they're attracted to, but honestly, the rating scale is kind of juvenile, so it's just kind of ridiculous. In my life, I've never had somebody say, I'm gonna rate you. But honestly, let's say someone wants to date you and they want to rate you, and they give you an 8 or 9 or a 10, I don't think that's somebody you should even be dating. Maybe if they give you a 10, but it doesn't even make sense. Like, why would somebody be telling you you're an 8 and they want to still date you? It doesn't even make sense. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But I digress, because I don't want people to start thinking like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. Somebody's an 8, they're 8. It's just a stupid thing. Like, it just makes no sense. Once again, any person that I've dated, I have never in my life thought to rate them on a scale. So once again, it's kind of juvenile. So you should run from that podcast if they're using rating scales for people's appearance or even overall. Okay. Here's another one. Weight. Once again, just like I mentioned, physical appearance is important. Weight is important. You need to care for yourself. You need to be healthy. And it varies, right? There's a difference between someone being 30 pounds overweight or they're looking chubby versus someone who is morbidly obese. That is a huge difference. But if you see a podcast and they're requesting the weight of a woman, it just doesn't make sense. It kind of just tells you the juvenile nature of the man, because that's just a well-known thing. Never ask a woman her age. Never ask a woman her weight. I just feel like, you can look at a person and see whether you're attracted to their body type or not. There's no reason to request somebody's weight, And then we have here, overweightness is ammunition. You'll notice on the podcast that they'll use someone being overweight. Actually, I've seen where the woman is not even overweight. Let's say that the woman is curvaceous. They might be, I think a lot of doctors don't even use the BMI scale, but looking at them, they're like someone who's not super thin, but they're like a normal weight. And I'm not even saying overweight. You may see that, and then the person will be talking negatively about their weight and stuff. It's just like, it doesn't make sense, because I always think to myself, I think to myself, these are podcasts. However, you have to be really mindful of what you're doing. Who are you helping? Who are you harming? You're teaching men that this is appropriate behavior. Even if you don't even agree with what you're doing, even if you believe that this is just something you're doing to make money or to have fame, you are influencing a generation of people. And of course, like, it's okay. I mean, it's definitely okay. If you want to date somebody who's healthy and fit and you're fit, it's wonderful. But my point about weight, I'm getting off track, is they use it as a way to talk down about the woman. Like, okay, she's overweight, you need to eat less, you need to exercise. That's a discipline issue, correct? Of course. But then you may see on that same podcast, they'll encourage men to not have sexual discipline, and they'll encourage men to sleep with whoever they want because they can't control themselves. So you're going to see a contradiction. If you notice that weight issue is present in terms of always talking about women's weight, a lot of times it's to try to make the woman feel bad, or what they'll veil it with, they'll say that it's to help the woman be realistic. Okay? And honestly, it's not. It's to lower the woman's self-esteem so she'll be open to dating men who maybe aren't, that good looking, or, they're not a man that she would normally date. But that's not the point. I just want you to focus on the fact that they're going to talk about the weight. First of all, what I've seen in my life is a lot of men don't like super thin women, even if it's healthier. I'm not saying underweight. They prefer someone who is like average or like a little overweight, right? Like, an overweight just means thick, who has a flat stomach, they have a nice shape. A lot of men prefer that over someone who is very thin. But anyway, if you notice that weight thing being present, and I definitely encourage people to get healthy, you should be in a healthy weight range. That is absolutely correct, right? You should have the discipline. But my point is, if you see a podcast and they're focused on the weight of the woman to talk down to her, but then they're encouraging not having sexual discipline for the man, you need to run. Here is a fun one. This one is, I will just state this outright, this is specifically for most likely Black individuals or people who are mixed with Black. Okay. You will hear the term hair hats. You should run. This is in reference to wigs, specifically wigs that African American and Black women are wearing. They have a disdain for wigs, and this is a way not to state that they love natural hair, although they will say that they prefer women's natural hair. Those same men who are talking down on the woman with wigs, they also don't like the woman's natural hair. They'll pretend like they do. The whole point of them, and them is just talking to any men that talks about hair hats or wigs, and it's specifically, like I said, for Black women. They will specifically say, it's a way for them to state, you don't have hair, your hair doesn't grow, and therefore you have a wig. And the other women, I forget what names they use. The other women of other races, they have real hair and they don't need to wear wigs. So they don't even really mind. They're not going to talk about women who has a wig or extensions if she's of a different race. It's specifically Black women. And like I said, the excuse will be they prefer natural hair of Black women, but in reality they don't. They prefer the straighter, curlier hair of other races. So they try to speak down about women wearing wigs. It's a shame, because honestly, a lot of other races of men, and like I said, it's not specifically, it's not only black men that say these things, but on average, other races don't really have a problem with black people wearing wigs, black women, which is a way to speak down negatively about black women. And I think it also disregards the fact that there's a reason why black women even started wearing wigs to begin with. It was more so to blend in with the society. Our hair was really talked down on. So, and also, I want you all to look at something. So the wigs and the hair treatments, hair straightening, in terms of chemical straightening. Thank God a lot of people aren't using the chemical straightening anymore. Just so you all know, there have been a lot of things that have come out about perms, the lye, and those sorts of things causing cancer. So be mindful of that. My point is, if you look at a lot of African American men or men who have a African hair texture, the majority of their hair textures, or a lot of the hairstyles, I should say, are cut super low compared to other races who actually let their hair grow out. So it hasn't just affected black women in terms of the hair thing. It's actually men too, because a lot of them cut their hair super low, so their hair texture doesn't show. That's all from back then, way back when. So just be mindful of that. I'm someone who I've definitely worn my natural hair for the past, I would say 6 months, but I'm someone who I switch things up. So it's honestly probably more for like a special occasion, but every now and then I'll wear a weave or something like that if I feel like it. There's nothing wrong with that. People want to look different and things like that. And I'm someone who, I have very thick hair, and my hair is not super long. So sometimes people want to wear a wig or a weave when they want their hair to look longer, And black people hair definitely does grow. You do have to take care of it, be patient with it and things like that. But statistics, scientific evidence has already shown that black people hair on average, it does grow more slowly. So let's say a black person on average hair might grow 0.9 inches in 2 months. I think it's that another group of race is like 1.5 inches. So there's a difference, and obviously everyone's hair growth is different, but just on average and in general. And then also, like I said, this slide is specifically more about black people, just this one slide. If you also hear people talking about passport bureaus and things like that, it's very important for you to run. I say this just because it's just probably a lot of ignorance. I just say it's ignorant because most likely, if you're somebody who's well traveled, or you know a lot of cultures and things like that, if you're a man from the United States and you go to another country, I don't want to say third world country, but an impoverished nation on average, and you're an American, it doesn't matter who you are, your race, the women are going to be interested in you because they either want to come to America, or and your money is worth so much more for them. So that's why I said it's just ignorance. So if you hear those passport bros, people encouraging that in their podcasts, just run. Another thing is going to be disparaging remarks. So you are going to hear some of the podcasts make some disparaging remarks about women, so I'm going to get into that here. So there may be a focus on the number of sexual partners a woman has had, and without any care about how many the man has. It's not important to them. It's just a focus on the women. And then they'll talk about society and history and things like that. And they'll use things like, they'll say body count, and they'll say things like the woman has been ran through, just things that don't really sound right, just sounds kind of off if somebody actually cared about women. And then also they may have women in the sex industry on their podcast, like using that as the general population of women. They'll use women who maybe have had trauma in their past and are in the sex industry, or women who are your average girl next door to represent women overall. They'll also use the term 304. If you type that in on a calculator and you turn it upside down, it should spell out the word HOE. Once again, 304, that's just a way for them to say the word HOE. If you type in 304 on a calculator and turn it upside down, it'll spell out HOE. Okay, lowercase h, O, capital E. So those are things you need to be on the lookout for. And of course, you definitely should wait for sex until you're married. That's not always the case for everyone. My point in bringing up this point is that this is another way for them, people in these toxic male podcasts. This is not men overall, just a toxic male podcast. It's a way for them to talk down about women. They're not asking the men the number of partners they've had. This is just a way for them to disparage. And I would say on average, I'm not trying to be funny, I don't think any man in my life who has dated me has ever even asked me this question. Not even my husband. I just think this is, and of course, this is something you can tell somebody, like, you know, this is something if you've been with no people, you know, if you've been with a few, like one person, that's fine, you know, you can tell them, but it's not really a question that somebody who is interested in you is going to be asking and prying. You know, obviously, if you're in the sex industry and you've turned your life around back to Christ, this is something that you should most likely reveal to your partner, because there may be some trauma and some issues that you're dealing with that may require counseling. So in those cases, sure. But just on average, like good men, like normal men, if they're focused on you and you're present, they're not really asking those questions, because to them it's kind of like irrelevant, especially if they see you for who you are. They're interested in you. They want to be with you. They love you. Yeah, honestly, I think if somebody's asking that question, it's kind of like a way for them to try to like judge you for something. And of course, you definitely should not have a lot of partners. That's not what God intended. You should definitely not. I just bring this up to say, but if you have, God can definitely redeem you. I remember in college, like I was like 18 or 19, there was a young lady. She came from Russia, or one of the countries that sound Russian to Americans. I think she was from Russia or Czechoslovakia. And she was just talking nonchalantly, like saying, yeah, I was what do you call the girls who like wear bikinis and like help sell cars. She was like, yeah, like I've been with like 40 people. She said it so nonchalantly. I was like, wow. But it was, I mean, obviously she probably had some like issues and things like that, but it's just not I should have said it's not like a respectful question, you know? And then they'll also say like, oh, you know, whatever they tell you, they're going to be lying anyway. So there's no point in men asking if they think the woman's lying in the first place. So this is just kind of like another juvenile question. And it's just something you should be on the lookout for if you are looking for a male podcast to watch, because this is more of a toxic questions, and more so used to speak negatively about women. Once again, they will be having women who are in the sex industry on their podcast. Here's another thing that they will be using. It's called sexual market value or sexual marketplace. If you hear these words, just run. It's irrelevant to you, especially as a woman. What they'll do is they're basing the value of women based on several factors. It could be status and resources, looks, age. These are not the only four. I just randomly like looked up an analysis about it, and these were the first four, the top four. Status and resources took up at least 50% of this pie chart that had probably like 10 different factors. That's for what they claim women want. And then looks and age took over half of these 10 different factors for what they claim men want. So, it's just something that you want to look into, because when they mention these things, they're kind of reducing women to numbers and things like that. But a lot of it actually even comes from Kevin Samuels as well. So this word started being used a lot because of him. So if you hear a lot of podcasts using this, just take it as they got their blueprint from him. So a lot of these podcasts aren't even original, right? So keep that in mind. And if you think about it, like me knowing people, being a woman, knowing men and women, family, friends, I know that looks and age are not more than half of what a man is looking for in a woman. So a lot of stuff is lies, and let's say even if that was the case, that is not what you're supposed to be looking for as a Christian. Like, that is not. The number one thing, which was not listed anywhere in these 10 plus traits that were listed, is character. That's the first thing that needs to be present. That is number one. And I also noticed that they made it seem like faithfulness is important for men, for the woman to be faithful, but they didn't put that in for the woman being caring about. Which just goes to show you it's another way for them to perpetuate this idea that men can sleep with whoever they want. They don't have to be faithful, And when it comes to the age thing, this is another thing. You are also going to hear a lot of men saying, listen up, not just men, toxic male podcasts, basically stating that once a woman hits 30, she has hit the wall. So if you hear the terminology, the wall, run, don't watch that podcast. They're going to say that the woman has hit her peak, she's reached her limit, she is no longer valuable in society. Imagine that, a woman over 30 never being valuable in society when women are living up to 80 years old today. Think of that, right? In terms of her being on the market, I should say. Meanwhile, I know people who are getting married at plenty of ages. My own mother, I believe she got remarried in her mid-50s to a man who was not older than her, to a man who was actually younger than her, and has men looking at her all the time because she's a good-looking lady and she has a great character. But if you hear them talking about those things, I just want to come from a realistic place. They're using it as a way to talk down to women, I definitely encourage women who are in their 20s to, work on themselves. You need to be healed, and then you can be ready for your partner. So work on yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And then you can be prepared to have a spouse. And it's best, especially if you're looking to have children, if you want a large family, that is the best time to be on the lookout. But there's so many women nowadays who aren't getting married until their 30s, and I was one of them. So, and I told you all before, I had 3 men who were running after me, okay? 3 quality men. So if you're a good person, if you focus on your health, eat well, dress well, exercise, have a deep relationship with God and Christ, that being first, your partner's gonna come. And there's many women who they get pregnant, they get married in their 30s and get pregnant soon after. So this whole idea about 30 just doesn't make sense. And I've seen most men usually want a woman who's close to their age, not way younger, Like, on average, a 40-year-old man, he might want somebody who's like, he'll be okay with a woman who's a little bit older. But let's say he wants kids, he might be looking more for a woman who's like about 30 to 35 or 40. A 40-year-old man on average is not going for a 20-year-old. So, don't ever feel like it's over for you, ladies. If you reach 30, it's not the case. But you do want to live your life to where you know, if you want children, it's time to take those steps and heal so you can have the right partner for you. But if you notice I'm talking about the wall or saying that, you know, women's value, you're over 30, oh wow, no, horrible, just run, because your value is in Christ, okay? All of your value comes from Christ, your purpose on earth, you living right, you working on yourself, and yeah, you're gonna find somebody. Everyone's beautiful in their own way. There's somebody out there for you. And I always say, you're not looking for 50 men to be your husband, it's one. Your husband's not looking for, I hope he's not looking for 50 women to be his wife, he's looking for one. Your value is coming from Christ Jesus. Always keep that in mind. So no one can say you have less value. And if a man is saying that, that is probably also a way for them, especially on a podcast, to try to get women to settle. Women to say, oh, you're 30? You're 32? Oh, please, you better be, you better not think you're going to be celibate. That's the way for that to be perpetuated as well. So run when you hear sexual market value, run when you hear the wall, run when you hear 30 plus is low value. All right, so we just covered the last topic. Now I want to be on to high expectations of others. So these podcasts are toxic when, let's say, the woman is having very high expectations of the man and not for themselves, or the man is having extremely high expectations for the woman and not for himself. There's an idea that men are owed something in life. And if you know what a man is, a man who is a real, true man, he doesn't want life easy. He doesn't take shortcuts. He loves to win after working hard for something. Anyway, so when it comes to men being owed something, they'll speak about women and saying women need to be virgins. They should be virgins. They shouldn't be, sleeping around. And that is actually true. Women should not be sleeping around. You should be a virgin when you get married. But at the same time, they will believe they're owed sex by a woman on the third date or early on. They will most likely not want to wait for sex before marriage, because a lot of their teachings are about how men need sex and need to have sex with whoever they want. Not whoever they want, as in like trying to, get somebody to do something that they don't want to do, but they need to be having multiple partners. I need to get experience. But then at the same time, they believe women should be virgins or like talk about the body count. Does that make sense? Because who are the women having sex with in the first place? Aren't they having sex with the men? So there's like that double standard. Look out for that. And then in terms of single mothers, since the men on the podcast believe that they're owed something, they do not believe women who are single mothers can be celibate. They believe you got pregnant by a man in the past. Let's say the woman, she could even be divorced or a baby mom, had a child out of wedlock. And they'll say, you gave somebody a child and you had sex to do that. There's no way you can be celibate. I am owed to be able to sleep with the woman. That's their perspective, which makes no sense, because there's many women who have had sex before. They did not become pregnant, or if they got pregnant, they might have decided that they did not want to keep their child. They could have, given the baby up for adoption, or, gone through that procedure. I don't know if I can say it on YouTube, but or aborted their child, okay? So the whole thought process rationale, logic behind it doesn't make sense. But they believe that they're owed those things. And also, keep in mind, this is an important key, they may actually have a dislike for single mothers because their own mothers were single mothers. That can sometimes make them become upset, right? They're looking to sympathize with the fathers that maybe weren't around, and because they're always around their mom, they see how they are. They see maybe their mom is not easy. Easy in terms of personality. She might be harsh. Then they've grown to dislike women. I encourage you to research the background of the men in their podcast. Not saying men who are raised by single mothers that you can't watch their podcast. I'm just saying I encourage you to research their history and their background. One that comes to mind is Kevin Samuels. I've mentioned him a couple of times. He was raised by his mom and his grandmother, I believe, right? And that affected him, And in terms of his background, I think he had 2 divorces. He probably wasn't raised to be able to know how to be a strong leader in his household. I don't know what happened with the women. I don't even know the women. I don't know anything about them. So I'm not talking about them. I'm just talking about him because I know who he is. He had 2 divorces. That tells you something. But remind you, he was giving dating advice. And people were eating it up. But I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Probably in the next slide or 2. So yes, they believe that they're owed something. And some of them dislike single mothers for those reasons. And at the same time, there's a lot of men out here who have multiple kids, but you won't really hear them saying that. There's a lot of men who are leaving women when they have kids. There's my stepfather. He's not really from the United States. He's from an African country, and he found it so disturbing. He was so shocked that in the United States, the men are able to create other families after having a family without taking care of the first one. So that was like shock. In Africa, not saying his country, but there's places in Africa where you have multiple wives, but you have to take take care of all of them. So he was just shocked that it's okay, because in certain countries, I believe in his country specifically, that man has to go marry that woman. So there's just a cultural difference. Okay. And here, I call this one coffee dates because a lot of these points here are about coffee dates or relate to it. That whole mindset behind coffee date. If you hear the man talking about the first date should be a coffee date, I recommend you run. Now there are some women who are, or there's some men who I'm not going to call toxic, and some women I'm not going to call toxic, who are encouraging coffee dates, but the reasoning behind it is a good reason. For this point, I'll explain why coffee dates are not a good one. A lot of the men who have the coffee date mentality, they're competing with women. You'll find that some of the toxic male podcasts are going to speak negatively about some common jobs and careers that women have. It could be a nurse. They'll say run from nurses. It's like just regular professional jobs. They encourage people they'll encourage men not to date them, almost as if the women are competing with them, or I should say the men are competing with the women. And a lot of the jobs that they're referencing, some of them require a woman to go on and get her education. They'll use the terminology and call women PhDs who have furthered their education. And when you think about it, a man or woman, let's say that they're highly educated, straight A student, it's not unlikely that they're going to further their education. Learning is probably super fun to them. So be mindful of people who have a problem with women pursuing a higher education. And you also hear them say terms like boss babes. If you hear them talking about boss babes in a condescending way, just run. There are so many women who have been starting their own businesses, selling hair, becoming an estheticians, working in a beauty industry, setting up their own nail salons, and they're doing really well. So it just comes down to the whole competition aspect with men and women. So if you hear them talking very poorly about women in careers, I would say run is that competition aspect, because a lot of the men with a coffee date mindset, they are 50-50 men. They believe that woman needs to pay half and half. So that makes me wonder, if you want the woman to pay half and half, why wouldn't you want her to have a good career? Is it that your career is not too good, so you feel intimidated or you feel bad if she has a higher career than you? I'm not sure, but that's what it comes off as, okay? And I put this point here because a lot of the things that I'm talking about with these toxic male podcasts are not positive. So I just made this point here. Men love women on average. So if you ever get the sense in a podcast that the men hates the woman, or that the men hates women as he's talking about women, just run. You'll feel it in your spirit. You'll feel it in your heart, because on average, good healed men love women. They see women as the weaker sex. They understand that they need to find themselves a good wife. And it's not like there's just one good woman. There's tons of good women. They need to find a good one for them, the best one for them. And they understand that there's men in society, there's women in society. They love women. So if you ever feel in your heart and your soul that the podcast that you're watching really dislikes women, talking down to them, or bringing on women who maybe are doing some unfavorable jobs, like, having the OnlyFans and things like that, and they're taking off their clothing and using those type of women to try to talk down to women as a whole and trying to make that woman feel small for those decisions that she made, just run. Because on average, a good man is not going to do that. If he really does care about the woman doing something that's wrong, he's going to say it in a way of love, not in a way to make her feel bad and feel that she's dirty, disgusting, and she's nothing. I mentioned 50-50 because if somebody asks you to do a coffee date, that is more than likely a 50-50 person, someone who's interested in doing 50-50, because in their mind they're thinking, okay, well, I can do a coffee date now, and if I want to do a nice date later, I will. But I'm here to tell you, on average, if you want a coffee date, it's very unlikely that you're going to get such a beautiful, nice date afterwards. You've already set the standard. Coffee is good enough for you. So next day you can go to a park, do something else like that. And I always say, if you want to do 50-50, if you want to do 50-50 in your relationship, that is completely up to you. That's a decision you have to make within your relationship with your partner. However, if that's not what you're looking for, a coffee date is not going to be for you. And also just keep in mind, a lot of these men, or I don't like to say these and those a lot, but I'll just say the toxic male podcasters, some of them make it seem, they talk about how they're making good money and things like that. But at the same time, it's almost like the woman has to earn these things. So even if the man is not doing 50-50 and he's paying all the bills or all the large bills, they may still feel like you're not owed a nice date. You're not owed anything good. You're not owed flowers. My husband, he brought me flowers on every single date, That definitely made me, I really appreciate that, because I love flowers. There was nothing wrong with him doing that, and I really appreciate him for that. So, yeah, so just keep that in mind. If you're a woman who likes to be treated like a feminine lady, a coffee date is not really going to prove that, just because, oh, another thing, you'll hear them say that men are the prize. And that's not a good way to think. If you're the man, if you're the leader, you're the one that goes out, hunts, you bring that game back home, you bring the food back home, you go out and you get that prize, even when you're dating, then that's not the case, right? Don't you feel proud as a man to go out and get the prize, get the woman that you want? So, of course, men are valuable, women are valuable, but if you hear them talking like that, it's a run situation, because they believe that they're owed something, they're the prize, they're the one. But in actuality, men are the risk takers. So men are the leaders. Men are awesome. You're the head. You're the risk taker. So a coffee date is nothing like a risk. A risk is, okay, I've spoken to this lady on the phone Her pictures are all recent. I even see her Instagram. I don't encourage sharing Instagram, but let's just say the woman wants to share Instagram and you share it as well, whatever social media, you know. Oh, I see these pictures of recent. I see her. I've had a nice conversation with her. 30 minutes. We've actually had 2 calls, and I want to take her on a date. That's the risk. The risk is you actually purchasing a lunch for her. It doesn't mean anything extravagant. Like, I know everyone has different incomes, but a coffee, it is just nothing, because I can buy a man on the street coffee who's sitting out there and who's cold. I can buy a man on the street a meal. My mom does it all the time. Like, she'll see poor people and she'll buy them meals. So that's the thing. If people I know can buy meals for men who are on the street, we'll go in and get them a full meal. Shouldn't that not be a big deal? You know, if I can go and buy meals for my friends, it might not even be their birthday or anything. It might just be anything. If I can go and buy my sister's food or when we go out, why wouldn't a man do that? So that just makes me, I don't know, it's just like, the man takes the risk. You don't have to go to somewhere super fancy if you can't, it's not in your budget. But you can't even buy a lunch. The woman is taking her time. You're interested in her. You're looking for a wife. The wife is going to help your life tremendously. Of course, you're going to help her life too. But by having a wife, it definitely takes a lot off your plate. In more traditional households, like if the woman's cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, that takes so much off your plate. You can focus on your job, your career. But yes, you'll find that a lot of this mindset of coffee dates, the men also believe that they're owed something. So I gotta know for sure. I gotta know before, and then maybe I'll give you a date afterwards. You gotta prove that to me. What do you bring to the table as a woman? Those are the things that they're gonna be asking you, and you'll see it on a podcast as well. And they'll feel as well, if they give you a nice date, then they're owed something afterwards. That you owe them a kiss, or you know, in some really strange situation that you owe them something else. So just be mindful of those things. And then I'm gonna focus here on hearing the words traditional and modern. You probably want to run first when you hear those words a lot too. Just run. Because of the men, a lot of times they're talking about traditional men and modern women, but when you hear them, you'll actually find that the men are actually not traditional at all. The men are into a lot of the men on the podcast are into 50-50 dating, or the women owe them, and that's not how it was traditionally at all. So it's just a lot of confusion and foolishness being spewed, a lot of nonsense. So if you hear them talking about women being modern, men being traditional, you're just going to realize, wait a minute, it doesn't even make sense, because the men that they're talking about sleeping around with multiple women, that's not even traditional. It doesn't make sense. Sorry. And then for modern, talking about modern women, but this is what gets me. This is what I want you to pay attention to. Remember, men are the head, right? They're the head of their household. The large majority of the responsibility falls on them. You even see in the Bible with Eve, right? Eve was misled by the serpent. She ate the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. And it had already been said by God. God told Adam not to eat of that fruit. And we can just assume Adam relayed the information to Eve when she was created for him, when she was taken from his rib to be created. And that word came directly from God to Adam. Adam, we can assume, related to Eve because she was aware of it. And then the serpent came and misled her, deceived her. So in that, God first straight went to Adam as the head. He said, because she got the fruit, she ate it, and he was with her, and I believe it said that he was like near her, and then she gave him some. And God went straight to Adam first. Of course, God was aware of what happened. He already knew. He's omniscient. And he asked Adam, why did you eat that? I told you not to eat that fruit. And then he said, Adam replied, this is probably what's happening now, right? Like blaming the woman. He said, well, the woman you gave me, she gave me that fruit. And then God went to her and basically asked her, what has she done? And she, explained herself. And then from that, God punished both of them. But I just brought that up just to show how the responsibility lies on both, because both were punished, but the main responsibility lies on the man. Both were responsible, both were punished. Adam was punished by, having to work hard and, slaving the son. Basically, the punishment for men was that they have to work hard. And the punishment for women was that they'll have like pain in childbirth, and that their heart will be for their man, but that the man is going to rule over them. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Anyway, men are the head. So when they're talking about traditional versus modern, the whole point is to try to say that, well, women are so modern, so this is how you have to treat them. I guess you can say in a modern way. They don't say modern, like for men to be modern, but basically saying women are modern, so this is how you treat them. However, the men are the head. So by them saying that, they're implying that a woman's behavior directs how the man is going to behave, which is not the case. When there's a company, there's a CEO. It's not the CEO's behavior is not determined by all the subordinates. Of course, they'll listen. They'll have surveys, see how people feel about certain things, what they want in the company. But what he does, it doesn't. Basically, what he says, those below him have to do. But what everyone below him says, that doesn't mean he has to do. So this implies that men are weak, and that's not the case. So whenever you hear them saying modern, it's because of modern woman this, modern woman that. First of all, if there's modern women, there's modern men. Aren't we living in modernity? The majority of people have a modern mindset. And of course, we have traditional views. Like, we still try to pull back into that. Like, me personally, in my household, I do believe that, the responsibility in terms of us having a place to live, I do believe that falls on the man. Like, that's why I always say, if you see a man and he has roommates, and he's from this country, and you never see him on his own, he always has to have a roommate or a girlfriend, a living girlfriend, that's not the man for you. Because especially if you want somebody who's going to maintain the household in terms of providing, it's not going to work, because he has not been able to provide for himself without having a roommate or a living girlfriend before. So keep that in mind. Not to talk down about those people, but just mentioning that in case somebody then wants to get upset at the man for wanting to go 50-50 with the woman, when he's already showed you that that's what he would want then. So there's no reason to get mad at him, because all of his, his previous relationships, his past living situations have shown you that that's what he would want. Basically, my point is, if you're really a traditional man, your behavior would guide the relationship. Because you're so traditional, caring, chivalrous, the woman will become more traditional. So just keep that in mind, okay? And she'll want to do things your way. You're traditional, you want to court her, you want to wait for marriage. She'll begin to feel that way as well, because you're the head. So you can't blame a woman being modern. First of all, the man is modern as well. We can't blame that on her being modern. So that's also like somebody doing bad things. I'm not saying modern or traditional is bad or good. Maybe it just is, but that's like somebody doing something bad. Let's just assume modern is bad. Someone doing something bad, rather than you trying to change the narrative, you're trying to change things, you decide, I'm going to do something bad as well. This woman, I believe she's bad, so I'm going to treat her bad, and I'm going to be a bad man. That doesn't make sense. So if you hear that traditional versus modern thing going on, it's probably not a podcast you should be watching. And this, once again, this bleeds into all different podcasts. It might not even be a toxic male podcast. It could be a toxic woman podcast. just a toxic podcast. It can be a regular podcast. It's all bleeding everywhere. And here it says women must prove themselves. I know I mentioned that before, but that's really how a lot of the male podcasters, the toxic one, not male podcasters in general, feel. I was laughing to myself as I put the words in parentheses. Prove themselves like they mama, okay? So let's just assume the man might have had a single mom situation. And what I've seen is a lot of single moms, when they have sons, they love their sons so much. Sometimes they feel bad because their father's not around, or the father didn't want to step up, and they treat their son so amazing. They do everything for them. They don't really teach them, to do anything in the house. They just do everything. And then that son sees that mom works hard. I won't say work like a slave, but she's working 2-3 jobs, try to put food on the table. So then the young man grows up and he believes that's how it's supposed to be. So he believes that woman needs to do the same thing. Whoever I end up with, yeah, she's going to work. She better work. My mama worked. And once again, if the woman wants to work, that's fine. I believe the man should be giving the woman that option, right? And then, hey, a woman is a caring being. So let's say the man, he's trying his best and he's not able to fully support the household. If they're married, the woman is likely going to step in, Or it might be a situation if you have children, it might not be beneficial to now pay a lot of childcare fees when it might just be better for the woman to stay home, but just in general. So yes, just be mindful of that. A lot of times when the podcasts are stating that women need to prove themselves and things like that, it may come down to how they grew up. If you're in a 2-parent household, whether or not the parents split 50-50, you kind of are used to your dad having that leadership role. You're used to your dad looking out for you, looking out for your mom, protecting. Even if she's working, the dad is still protective, right? So that's kind of where things can become warped. I'm not saying that every toxic podcaster is from a single mom, although I have seen a lot who didn't have their father figure out, or at least a male mentor, but that's not the case for everyone. You're also going to hear the word cooperative a lot. Cooperative is not a bad word. I mentioned before that I have experience in human resources. That's a word that we use when you're in the corporate world, cooperative, right? Okay, I appreciate your cooperation, blah, blah, blah. Being cooperative, yes, it's working towards the best goal for the company or the group or the relationship in this case. But you'll notice that a lot of the toxic male podcasts will use it specifically only for women. And when you think of when you hear cooperative, I was shocked actually. There's a male podcast. I wouldn't call him toxic. He's neutral. However, all his videos are usually talking about women and things that they do, but he's pretty neutral. He mentioned cooperative for a man before. The man needs to be cooperative. I was very impressed. But the reason why I say on average, if you hear the word cooperative, it's not such a good thing. In a male podcast, it's mainly because if it's only directed towards women. Cooperation, yes, you're moving towards a goal for the relationship, a beneficial goal, but it may also, that word also means maybe doing something, giving up something for the betterment of the group. And in that case, it kind of means that the compromise is always on the woman. And so just be mindful of that in a podcast. I would run, if they're always talking about the cooperation of a woman and never about compromise on the man's side. This is being used on all podcasts, all content creators all around, or a lot, I should say. But if it's on a relationship channel for men, they're talking about high value, just run. This word has been overused. I personally, I don't say high value because in a lot of the toxic male podcaster mind, and this viewpoint is seeping into other podcasts and other content creators, their mind, a high value means those men are providers, high earners, and therefore they can cheat freely. So just run. What I talk about is character, or I'll say quality man, or you can even say high quality man. My main thing, I always talk about the character of a man, or I'll say a quality man. I found there were 3 quality men who were interested in me. And when you say quality, that's going to have a lot of factors. It's going to be a quality man, in my opinion, has character. He's a protector, a provider, and he loves God. So if they're talking about high value a lot, and it's a relationship channel for men where they speak about women negatively, just run. Here's the final section. I hope this has been helpful to you. You'll notice, here's a way to identify a toxic male podcast. That is if you're noticing that they have a lot of anger towards the women gender. And for women, if it's a toxic woman podcast, they're going to have a lot of anger towards the men. So those people who are very angry towards the opposite gender, as I said before, men love women. Women love men on average. So these people who are angry towards the other gender, they don't love that other gender. They're very angry at them. These are people who require healing. Not saying that, they're bad people. They need to be healed. That's why it's very important before you date or try to give advice that you've healed. What you'll notice is that they're going to blame the other gender for everything. It's very bad, I believe, if a woman is doing this about men. In general, like when I'm giving my advice, it's typically for women, right? I feel like that's my expertise. I'm a woman. But of course, you can give general advice as a whole, but if a woman is just bad-mouthing men or a certain type of men, that woman is not healed. She should stop giving advice and move on. Same for a man. It's actually a little worse for a man, and I'll just explain why once again, because he's the head, he's the leader. A real man, you'll hear them talk about masculine men versus feminine women a lot, or they'll be calling women masculine a lot. If a man's man, he's a man, right? If there's an issue and there's a man, they're not going to focus on the woman all the time as if they haven't looked at themselves. When you see the podcast, once again, this is focused on toxic male podcasts. If they're focused primarily on women and everything a woman does wrong, they never talk about men ever, never really talk about any bad situations with men, what men are doing wrong, it's time to run. Because, like I said, I'm talking to women about, what they should look out for, things like that. The men should be doing the same thing. You're a man. I won't be surprised if men don't listen to, mind you, I have a lot of male subscribers, but on average, who should be chastising and telling men what they need to be doing is men. That's why men need their fathers in their lives, or if they don't have a father, they need a male mentor, whether it's an uncle, somebody who can help them, family friend. Men need to talk to men. Men listen to men. How many times in families will the mom tell the child, it'll be a boy or girl, I'm going to tell your father when he comes home, and the child will get scared or get upset, right? The man has a role. So men, when you have a man in your life as a male child, you're taught about responsibility and taking ownership of your faults. When that man, that leader, is not in the home, it's a little bit difficult. It's been proven with statistics and different various cases that it's very detrimental for males and females to not have their father in the home. However, it's worse for boys and men when not having their father. So also look out for that. You'll notice that they may, in their videos, they may even talk about fatherless women. Keep in mind, yes, it affects women, but the stats have proven that it affects men worse, but they'll never mention the effects on men. And a lot of times the men who are even talking about fatherless women were fatherless themselves. So I like to look at it like, I'm like, wait a minute. Both situations were bad, but you might actually not realize it, but as a man without your father, you might actually have been affected worse than this woman that you're talking about. So I even say, like, when I see that, I always think to myself, like, it's like a man who is morbidly obese, or not a man, it's like a person who is morbidly obese, just like the man in the situation, but it doesn't matter the gender in this particular scenario. A person who's morbidly obese telling a person who is moderately obese, meaning not as obese as the morbidly obese person, that they're too big. Does that make sense? Like, there's both problems are really bad. Both need to work on their health. You know, what's the scripture about? You really can't be trying to take the plank out of, trying to take the stick out of someone's eye when you have a huge plank in your own. Okay. So you'll see that videos, you know, a lot of people need healing. You know, everybody seems to turn to Christ, women and men, because when you don't have that identity, when you don't know who you are in Christ, you're going to blame other people. Everything is everyone else's fault. So once again, this video is not, I can do other videos, but I just want to talk about this specifically because this is something that I've noticed, and it's influencing a generation of men. It's influencing even a generation of women. So now they're believing it. You know, they're believing they have no worth past 30, that they're nothing, they need to settle. If they're a single mom who turned their life over to Christ, now they can't be celibate. It's just doing a lot. It's doing a horrible thing. And it all comes down to, honestly, like, I just pray to God that men can turn around and start staying in their homes more, because that's where a lot of it comes from. That's where these podcasts are coming from. A place of hurt and not being fully healed and knowing who you are in Christ. So rather than being proud and confident in who you are, they're not men and women. So they focus on the other gender, and it's destroying our communities. You'll find that these people who have not been healed, some of the traumas that they haven't been healed from are from their childhood. Maybe if it's a guy, maybe he didn't fit in. Maybe he was a certain race and multiple races he didn't fit with either race. And maybe he had friends from one particular race, even though he wasn't considered that race. But then now, let's say the person is Arabic, like a mixed Arabic person, and they didn't grow up black, they didn't grow up white, and their friends were mainly white, but because they were like an Arabic, the white girls weren't interested in them, even though they liked those girls. And then now they grow up, they haven't dealt with those issues, and now they are pushing that on other people, you know, and trying to make people feel bad, trying to bring all the women down who didn't like them. Or now they've gotten their money up. They might think, I may not look that good, but I got my money now, so now I'm entitled to this. I didn't have this before. I'm entitled to this woman. I deserve this woman. But you'll find that in terms of the home life, there is probably, more likely than not, there was an absent father. Not in every case. And they could have had a harsh mother. They could have grown up in a single mother household, and their mom could have been harsh. Or maybe their mom, from their perspective, was weak. There might have been boyfriends in and out the home. Or maybe there was a stepfather who mistreated them. There are some issues that need to be healed. These are things of life that happen. You know, it's not right. But we as adults, we have to make a change. We have to take the help that we need. We have to work through these issues. And a lot of times what we grow up seeing, we end up perpetuating it in adulthood. But we have to learn, you know, we have to move forward and we have to make change. It's not the person's fault when those things happen, but sometimes those things make you stronger. But you have to be able to look at it and see what you can learn from those situations, what changes you can make, how you can raise your future children, rather than holding on to those things as your identity and then mistreating others around you because of it. This goes for men and women. But yeah, it's been proven that the parent that has the most influence on you, that you need the most, is the parent of the same gender. So it's really heartbreaking when men don't have a man in their life, and at least having a male figure will help them, because a lot of times you feel like, why didn't my father want me? If you're a male, like, why did he abandon me? Or you might start getting mad at women. Or what did my mom do for him not to be around? Or, my mom is so daft and that's why he left. And it just causes a lot of confusion. And when you're growing up, you don't really understand. But when you become adult, it really affects you. So just be mindful of those things. Some of those people need healing, and all we can do is really pray for them. But I encourage you not to watch those podcasts. You'll also find that there's a pushing of teaching of other people's teachings. For instance, most everyone knows who Kevin Samuel is. And the reason why I've been able to mention his name in such a neutral way so far is because I remember him, and I remember how he was at the beginning. And I remembered a couple months before he passed, he started speaking to the woman nicely, regular, respectfully, and I saw that there was definitely a change in him. So that's why I can speak about him neutrally. But a lot of the things that he pushed, I'm not gonna speak negatively about him because he's passed, but it's clear it was coming from his own perspective, his hurt. Looking at him, I think he was in like the Glee Club or like theater or something like that growing up, and just looking at him, he's somebody who for sure people probably accused him of being gay. I'm not saying he was, but just based on how he looked, and I saw his picture when he was younger and stuff, he probably dealt with that. He probably dealt with, and then of course it happens a lot. If you don't have a male figure in life, you're raised by your grandmother, you're the only boy in your house, raised by your mom, you start picking up those mannerisms. It's natural. That's why it's also important to have your father in your life. So anyway, whatever his teachings were, I know where it came from. It came from a place of his own experiences. And he seemed to be very bitter. There's a lot of bitterness in his teachings. But I'm not saying that none of his teachings were true. There was a lot of truth in his message, but there was many things that were not okay and not accurate. So it's like having a glass of milk that's like 99% milk and then 1% cyanide, right? Does that mean that you should be drinking it? Absolutely not. So even if someone has 90% of the content is good, that 10% is not going to help you. It's going to be very difficult for you to decipher. It's better for you to just find a podcast that is all good, is not speaking negatively about people, because it's very hard to decipher. Whatever you let get in your ear, it can start infiltrating your mind, and in your subconscious, you'll start to believe those things without even knowing it, right? The Bible teaches us that what type of company? Bad company corrupts good character. So you're listening to these things and you think it's just for entertainment purposes, but it's not. It's getting in your brain. You're starting to believe. You're starting to recognize the teachings. You're starting to believe the teachings. And, they're in their childhood, for the people who are pushing these teachings, they may have had a rough childhood growing up. They may have had some issues, whatever it might have been. And then now, as an adult, some of them may feel lost because they didn't have a father figure. I know a lot of men, they didn't have their father in life, and they saw Kevin Samuels as a father figure. You'll hear a lot of them call him the Godfather. It's because they see him as a father. And the majority of the men that I see talking about Kevin Samuels, it's such a positive light. They didn't have a father in their life, because now this is an example for them. He's an older man. He, doesn't look bad. He didn't look bad or anything like that. And they, men who have fathers weren't really looking for those podcasts to help them. They can go to their own father for that. So here we are finally. Here's a summary of some of the things you should look out for when looking at male podcasts to identify whether it's toxic or not. There'll be comments regarding the mental state of the woman, as if something is wrong with her psychologically. They'll make disparaging remarks about women, oftentimes to try to make her feel low, lower her standards for a relationship, and convince her to do things that are beneficial to the man but not her. They'll talk about the woman's physical appearance as if that's the only thing she's good for. That's the only thing that would make her valuable for a relationship with a man. They'll have high expectations of others, but not those same expectations for themselves, especially not that high. And they'll have anger towards the opposite gender. So let's just wrap this up. Let's focus on this. Men and women definitely need one another. There can be toxic podcasts for both genders, so I don't want to stray from that, but this particular video is for toxic male podcasts, okay? But men and women need one another. You know, there's no reason for men and women to be in competition with one another. It shouldn't even be a thing. Then men are the leader in the relationship. So I think of it this way. Think of the man as the CEO and the woman as the COO, or like the ops manager in the company, right? So the CEO is always going to be consulting. The CEO has a specific role. The COO or ops manager person has a specific role, right? They do their own thing. They have their role. The ops is usually probably going to have to consult with the CEO about certain things, and the CEO is going to consult with the ops about some specific things. So that CEO, he is going to, he has that leadership role. He focuses on a lot of big issues. He'll be the face of the company. And the ops person, they do a lot of different things, a lot of things that can be taken off of the CEO's plate. They do their job well. They have a great function. They can make a lot of decisions. But when it comes down to it, they consult with the CEO a lot. And of course, the CEO does consult with the ops a lot as well. But I always think of it that way. That's what the leadership in the relationship is, right? The CEO and the COO, both are great positions, aren't they? But the one that has, in every relationship, there's going to be a leader. That the man is just the leader. He's a CEO. The woman is a COO. And it's just very important for you to remember. Please heal all of your past trauma before getting into a relationship. That's going to really help you move forward. It's going to be very difficult for you to get into a relationship without healing that past trauma. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful to you. Let me know your feedback. Did you find any of these tips helpful? Are there any other things that you can think of that people should be on the lookout for when identifying a toxic male podcast? Do you have any questions? So feel free to comment down below. Like the video, subscribe. When you're commenting, please be respectful, of course. This is my channel. I'll be helping any individuals. I also encourage you to email me at askkrystalracquel@gmail.com. Let me know what topic you'd like me to discuss. If you have a relationship concern, family dynamic concern, I'd be happy to give my perspective on another YouTube video, or if you ever need a coaching session or something like that, let me know. Thank you. Have a wonderful and blessed day.